Let's begin.
Scary, true, paranormal story number 1. The Ouija board murder.
When I was younger, I went through a phase of being very much into Ouija boards. I was fascinated by the supernatural and was quite disappointed that nothing paranormal had ever happened to me. That all changed during a sleepover that I attended in the 5th grade. Myself, along with 5 or so other girls from my class, were staying the night at this house of another classmate. Nothing of significance happened until later after her parents had gone to bed. We had played Light as a Feather, Stiff as a Board, and Bloody Mary, but nothing scary happened. So we had essentially given up on our mission to make contact with the ghost or entity, until one of the girls, who was my best friend at the time, smiled and slowly pulled something out of her bag. It was a Ouija board. The host of the sleepover was instantly upset at the sight of the board and demanded that it be taken out of the house. We asked her why was she so mad about it, but she didn't give us an answer. She just insisted that we put it away, or else her mom would freak out. Her mom wasn't really religious, so we just assumed that it was a superstitious thing. The girl who brought it would not accept no as an answer, and insisted that we played with the board and try to make contact. No one except for me, the girl who the board belonged to, and the sleepover host really believed in ghosts. We had asked several questions, and while the pointer did move, they attributed it to being me and my best friend moving it. They said the pointer was moving because someone that's touching it subconsciously moved it. That could have been true, so we decided to ask a question that I and only I knew the answer to. I intentionally did not put my hand on the piece to try and prove a point. Suddenly, the piece started moving. Immediately, it had spelled the answer to my question. The answer that no one else knew but me. I quickly yelled out, "That's correct." It was my mom's birthday. That's when my friend's mom came into the room. I'll never forget the expression on her face. It was one of pure terror and absolute shock. I knew my friend's mother very well, and never before then or since then have I seen her so profoundly upset. She was so mad that she actually called everyone's parents at 2 o'clock in the morning, insisting that our parents come pick us up. Ouija boards usually have some sort of sun and moon type thing in the top corners. The one we played with had an open eye in the left upper corner and a closed eye on the right. When we went back to pack up our stuff, we noticed that it had moved from the letter we had left it on, and it was slightly over the open eye. My friends and I looked at each other and decided it would be best not to share this with anyone else, so as to not cause unnecessary panic. When school started on that next Monday, we all ran up to the host of the sleepover and began asking what the hell happened and why her mom got so upset. She was visibly shaken and did not want to talk about it. But after being nagged all day by everyone who had attended the sleepover, she finally cracked. The story went that when her mom was in high school back in the day, she had this group of friends that she hung around with constantly. 2 members of their group were dating. One day, when they were seniors in high school, they decided to play with a Ouija board. They decided to ask it the one question that you're not supposed to ask. When am I going to die? One by one, the Ouija board gave them all dates. The couple that were there, both dating, got the same exact date. For a while, everyone kept the dates in the back of their minds, but as the years went on, they lost their contact with each other. The couple, on the other hand, stayed together throughout college, and one weekend, the boyfriend took his girlfriend on a trip with the intention of proposing to her. They were both murdered. A murder that to this day has gone unsolved. It happened on the day that the board had predicted they would both die. Now, I have no way of verifying the authenticity of her story, but based on the reaction of my friend's mom and the manner in which my friend retold the story to us, I have no doubt in my mind that this is true. It has now been 15 years since this has happened, and nothing has happened in regards to the pointer resting on the eye. I now refuse to participate in Ouija boards, and I strongly urge anyone who expresses interest in it not to as well.
Scary, true paranormal story number 2, The Wendigo.
When I was 8 years old, me and my parents lived right down the road from my grandparents' house in a small town. It was getting close to my 9th birthday when I came up with a bad form of strep throat. I was severely sick and could barely speak. I started experiencing cold sweats for the first time and could barely pull myself out of bed just to try and use the restroom. I was absolutely miserable, and of course, being as young as I was, I didn't take the pain very well. My poor mother was at loss of what to do, with her working and my dad working at night. The first day I was sick was on a Tuesday, and my birthday would fall on that following Friday. My dad stayed up most of the day with me. He made me food, let me sleep in his lap on the couch, and gave me medicine. But on the second day, my grandmother had called and offered to let me stay at her house so my dad could get some sleep. He said yes to this and woke me up around 7 o'clock that morning to drive me up to my grandma's house. My grandfather also worked at this time too, so he was already gone to work when I arrived. I don't remember too much of the early morning. I probably just slept in my grandmother's bed, tossing and turning. When I woke up feeling extra bad, she would encourage me to swallow my awful tasting medicine a little more gently than my dad did. She made some tomato soup for me to eat. It was the first time since I had gotten sick that I actually had an appetite. I should mention, my grandmother had this cute terrier dog named Samson. He was very quiet, not like the usual terrier dogs, annoyingly barking all the time. Samson came into the room and curled up next to me as I dozed off to sleep. I don't know exactly when I woke up, but at some point it had to be early afternoon or lunchtime because I could hear the TV faintly from the living room on some game show. My grandmother had a ritual of eating her lunch while watching a game show. It was The Price is Right. I was trying to fall back to sleep when I had gotten this really bad headache. I was on the verge of slipping back to sleep when I was jolted awake by someone calling out to Samson from the living room. Samson curled up next to my feet, perked up his head, but didn't move. I knew I had heard his name being called too, but it was odd he didn't respond. Samson, my grandmother's voice, called out again. Samson still didn't run out of the room to her. I was confused as he was very obedient to my grandmother. He was almost frozen still, staring at the cracked open door, but making no attempt to go to her. She called out maybe 3 or 4 more times. "Samson, come here." Then I got curious. I remember flipping the covers off me. My clothes were sticky with sweat, and I just generally felt uncomfortable and groggy. I stumbled out of the room, wiping my eyes, asking Grandma, "You need Samson. He's in your room with me." I made it to the living room, and I had to do a double take. The TV was still on and blaring. There was a bowl of soup sitting on the coffee table and an open Pepsi next to it. But my grandma wasn't anywhere in the room. I thought maybe she's in the bathroom. I crossed the room and went past the kitchen. I got to the bathroom door, which was shut. I then knocked. No one answered, so I slowly opened it, and no one was in there. The house seemed to be empty. It's not a huge house either, so I covered all the rooms. My first reaction was to get scared. I could clearly hear my grandmother calling for the dog, but she's not anywhere inside. I remember my hands and feet getting all tingly. I started shouting for my grandma, but my voice was just echoing through the small, cramped home. Samson had gotten up at this point and was sitting near the couch looking completely undisturbed. I fumbled for the remote and turned off the TV. I yelled for my grandma to the top of my lungs, which you can imagine how painful this was for a scratchy, infected throat. The worst part happened next. I can't explain the fear I felt. I heard her shouting my name back, clear as ever, like she was standing only 1 foot away from me. But I could not see her. I started crying, now scared out of my mind. I thought maybe it has to be a ghost. I grew up with scary ghost stories courtesy of my dad, of course, and I'm convinced now. I remember saying to myself, I'm in the room with the ghost. Then she, or whatever this was, proceeded to call my name again, and then there was a second voice, definitely not my grandmother's. It was deeper and more masculine. It was absolutely terrifying as it shouted, "Come to the front door." I did not do that. Instead, I made sure to run back to my grandparents' bedroom, lock the door, and pick up the telephone on their nightstand. I called my own home phone, and my dad's sleepy voice answered through a barely comprehensible voice. I managed to croak something like, "Daddy, there's someone in the house, and I can't find Grandma. She's gone." My dad, of course, said he jumped out of bed, grabbed his Swiss Army knife he kept in a drawer next to the bed, and ran down the road to the house in his PJs with bare feet. He ran up to the front door and jiggled the handle. It was locked. So he made his way around, and since he knew the garage code, he just punched it in, walked inside, and did a quick sweep of the rooms of the home. Everything showed that no one was there. It's not like there was anywhere to hide. I ran out of the room once I was sure he was there and began bawling and crying in his arms. He kept reassuring me there was no one here, then asked if I did know where Grandma possibly was. I said I hadn't seen her. I had woken up to her calling Samson, the dog, but she hadn't been anywhere. This was back when cell phones were definitely around, but not everyone had one. My grandparents certainly wouldn't have been buying them anyways. My dad had one, but not on him at the time. I could tell he was trying to keep calm, so he just said we would need to go back home. I was sure he was probably going to call the police at that point, just because my grandma still had not popped up, and her car was still in the garage, as if she just left on foot. As we were walking out of my grandmother's house, we hadn't even made 2 steps out of the doorway when my grandmother's neighbor's house door opened and my grandma was strolling out chatting to the neighbor. She saw my dad and then me crying my eyes out and immediately ran over to see what was going on. She was super apologetic. She said she'd stepped out right when she heated up her soup to go see her neighbor who called her about looking at something my grandma was going to buy. My grandma had figured I was asleep and she'd only be gone for 10 or 15 minutes. At first, people may have assumed I was feverish, therefore delusional, but I still stand by what happened. I know for a fact I was definitely alone in the house, except for Samson, but the voices I heard were real. For a while after that, I was hesitant to go back to my grandma's house. I later read stories at school about a Wendigo or certain creatures that would disguise their voices to lure people. This was the closest explanation regarding what I had heard. I never shared this with anyone. I'm close to my 20s now. I shared this story with my grandpa, and my grandfather told me something that gave me shivers down my spine. He said, "Honey, those voices you heard, I hear them every night. I just don't say anything to anyone."
Scary, true, paranormal story number 3. Prove it.
This story is about an experience I had using a Ouija board when I was in the 7th grade. I'm now 28 years old, so it was quite a while ago. I don't remember some of the smaller details anymore, but everything I'm writing actually happened, and this story is 100% true. I'm the kind of person who would probably never have believed in anything paranormal unless I experienced it myself. So in a way, I'm glad that this happened to me when it did, as it opened my eyes when I was still young. This all took place at my friend's, Mark's house. On the weekend, me and 3 of my friends had been hanging out at Mark's house all afternoon. Mark's parents were going out all night, and they had a rule that no friends were allowed over when they weren't there. So we were all getting ready to leave. Mark's parents were both doctors and insanely strict. He used to get grounded for weeks at a time for the most ridiculous reasons. Needless to say, we were all pretty surprised when his mom came upstairs and told us that we could all sleep over that night as long as we were good. In those days, having a house free of parents was a huge deal, and we were all really excited. Before I go on, let me explain the layout of the house really quick. It's in a nice neighborhood. Mark's house had a garage in the front, and there was a walkway along the side of the house that led to the front door, which was in the center of the house. When you walked in their house, there was a small guest bedroom to your left and a garage at the far end. To your right, there's a large open family room. Upstairs basically consisted of 2 bedrooms in the far right end of the house and a master bedroom right above the garage. So back to the story. After his parents left, a few of us ran home real quick to get a few things. We all lived pretty close, and I could skateboard from home in about 5 minutes. When everyone returned back to Mark's house, one of my friends had brought a Ouija board. We were all really eager to try it. We went upstairs to the game room to set it up. Mark locked up the house and turned off all the lights downstairs. When everything was all set up, the house was pitch dark, except for the ceiling fan light we had on so we could see what we were doing. I can't remember the specific questions we asked or the responses we got, but I do remember 2 brief interactions. By the time we were all into it, the questions were more provocative. I remember immediately feeling weird and I was getting nervous. The responses weren't the kind typical 7th graders could come up with, even if they were controlling it. The responses were getting more menacing, and everyone was getting scared. You could see it in their faces, but nobody wanted to show it. Then, my friend Brad, who had been asking most of the questions, screams out, "Prove it. Do something." Then, there was a few seconds of pure silence. Just as I was starting to feel relief from nothing happening, there was a gut-wrenching shriek from the cat downstairs, directly below us, followed immediately by the sound of shattering glass on the floor. I can't explain the fear I had at that moment. The next thing I remember was we were in the back of the game room. All you could see outside the room past the walkway was the top half of the stairway leading upstairs. We watched those stairs for what seemed like 30 minutes without saying a single word, hoping that no one would come up those stairs. At some point, we decided we had to go check out what happened. We all grabbed whatever makeshift weapons we could find and slowly made our way downstairs as a group. When we got around the corner of the staircase, the first thing I saw was the cat. It was still hissing, back arched, and scared to death. It was on top of a cabinet, about 10 feet from the stairs. At the bottom of the stairs was a giant puddle of water and shattered glass. It was one of those snow globes, the ones that are about the size of a small watermelon and are about 10 to 15 pounds. As soon as we all realized what happened, it hit everyone that this very large heavy snow globe had been on the cabinet far from where the cat was standing, which was 10 feet away from where it was smashed on the ground by itself. Before this could even sink in, music started playing in the kitchen behind us. At this point, we were all terrified. We ran into the kitchen and turned on the lights, and in the middle of the kitchen was one of those Santa Claus toys that shuffles around and sings a song when you turn it on. Mark runs up and grabs it, and he started flickering the power switch, but it did not turn off. It wouldn't turn off. He quickly hits it again and again against the counter, and when it still wouldn't turn off, he then threw it as hard as he could on the ground. When the toy broke, the battery cover flew off, and what I saw next with my own eyes haunts me to this very day. The toy had no batteries. The next thing I know is we were all upstairs in Mark's room. The door was locked and we were all praying. Nothing else happened after that, but needless to say, Mark was grounded when his parents got home because of the mess that was caused that night. I'm glad I experienced this, but there is no way I would ever use a Ouija board again in my entire life.